There we go. All right. 4.3 is all about rotations. We want to graph a rotation using the rules for changing coordinates. So typically the way that we would do this particular unit, it would involve a lot of paper and rotating things on paper. But since we don't have, you can't rotate your Chromebook or something like that to plot your new points and stuff like that, we're going to be using the rules for rotation instead. Did rotations in 8th grade. Awesome. So you already have some experience with rotations. Let's see. So in that case, in the chat, which direction is clockwise and which direction is counterclockwise? Like, which one would you turn to the right? Which one would you turn to the left? Because this is going to be important for us. So what do we remember about the directions clockwise and counterclockwise? Yes. Good. Yeah. Clockwise is to the right. Counterclockwise is to the left. If you think about the direction a clock goes, hopefully that, starts to make sense. Yeah. So when we talk about rotations, those are the two directions that we are going to be going, clockwise and counterclockwise. And it will usually be specified in the problem which direction you are going to be turning. So those are important things to know, especially when it comes to checking your work and making sure that we end up in the right location. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab some paper or your notebook or whatever you take notes in, and let's get started here. Paper. Okay, so 4.3 is all about rotations. Okay. So we're going to do rotations, and then we'll also talk a little bit about, if we have time for it, compositions of transformations. So let's see, when we rotate, you're going to have a point that you're rotating about. Pretty much all of our rotations will be about the origin. So when we say things like we're going to be rotating about the origin, that just means that, like if this was the origin, that's the point that I'm rotating around. So that's the point that we're holding still and spinning that object around. And then when we are rotating, we're going to be given specific instructions about how much we're rotating and what direction. So we have clockwise. And sometimes clockwise is abbreviated as CW. And clockwise is that direction, which is to the right, as you guys said. And then we have counterclockwise. And sometimes you'll see this abbreviated as CCW, which is to the left, as you guys mentioned. Okay, so we have clockwise to the right, counterclockwise to the left. So we'll be given a point that we're rotating about. We'll be given directions, clockwise or counterclockwise, but the point that we're rotating about will always be the origin. And then we'll also be given an amount of degrees. So our amounts of degrees are going to be either 90, 180, or 270. Okay. So our amounts of degrees are going to be 90, 180, or 270. 90 degrees is like a quarter turn. So if I start in like the first quadrant or something like that, and I rotate 90 degrees, I'll end up one quadrant over. So it's only one quadrant that you move. 180 degrees is like 2 quarter turns. Or 2 quadrants moved. So you'll move 2 quadrants over from where you started. And 270 is like 3 quarter turns. Or 3 quadrants displaced from where you were. Okay. So we've got kind of all the types of instructions that we will be given for rotations. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the rules of what's going to happen to your points from each of those rotations. And I'm going to draw a quick coordinate plane here and remind us of a few things here. So if you remember the quadrants from back in probably algebra, this was the first quadrant, this was the second quadrant, this was the third quadrant, and this was the fourth quadrant, and usually labeled with Roman numerals and stuff like that. So we need to remember that vocabulary real quick. Since it is something I'll be referencing. Okay. Okay, so for our rules of rotation, if I'm going to rotate something 90 degrees clockwise, so let's say I started in the first quadrant. If I'm going to rotate something 90 degrees clockwise, it's going to end up in the fourth quadrant because that's one quadrant to the right. If I start in the first quadrant and I rotate something 270 degrees counterclockwise, then I'd have to go 3 quadrants to the left. Well, that ends up in the same quadrant. So there's this trick that 90 degrees clockwise rotation is the same thing as 270 degrees counterclockwise rotation. Those are the same. And so if I start with my coordinates being x comma y, my new coordinates, if I do either of these rotations, are going to be negative y comma x. So you switch x and y, and you change the sign on the y. So we switch x and y, and we change the sign on y. So that's what happens if you do 90 clockwise. Sorry, let's change the sign on the x. My bad. Goodness. You switch x and y, and you change the sign on the x for 90 clockwise and 270 counterclockwise. Can't read my own writing. It's the opposite for the other one. If you do 90 degrees counterclockwise, well, that's the same thing as 270 degrees clockwise. So for this, you go from x comma y to negative y comma x. So you switch x and y, and you change the sign on y for those two options. Okay. And then the last option that's different than these is 180 degrees. 180 degrees is special because it doesn't matter if you rotate clockwise or counterclockwise, you're going to end up in the same spot. So if I go from, and if you think about it, when you're doing like a 180, if you were to jump and turn 180, it doesn't matter which direction you jump. Like if you turn to the right or you turn to the left, you're still going to end up facing backwards, right? So that's kind of the same idea with 180-degree rotation. It doesn't matter if you're going clockwise or counterclockwise. If I'm in the first quadrant and I go 180 degrees clockwise, I go 2 quadrants to the right, and I end up in the third quadrant. If I'm in the first quadrant and I go 180 counterclockwise, I go 2 quadrants to the left, and I still end up in the third quadrant. So 180 doesn't matter which direction I go. So clockwise or counterclockwise, doesn't matter. We go from xy to -x, -y. It's probably the easiest one. All you have to do is change the sign on both of your values. Okay. Give everyone a moment to get those written down, and we'll do a couple of examples. And for our IXL sections today, we're going to have 2 different kinds of problems. The first kind is going to be a graphing one, and the second kind is going to be just finding the coordinates. Okay. So we'll do a graphing one first. Calm down, Chromebook. Here we go. Example number 1. So just like yesterday, we're going to draw ourselves a nice coordinate plane. And we'll take coordinate A is going to be over 1 up 5. B is going to be 3, 3. And C will be 2, 1. And we are going to be asked to rotate ABC 270 degrees counterclockwise. Okay. So 270 degrees counterclockwise. And what I like to do first is kind of help myself figure out where I'm going to end up so that I can kind of check myself at the end. 270 degrees counterclockwise from here is going to put me 3 quadrants to the left. So 1, 2, 3. That means I'm going to end up somewhere down here. So if I've done it right at the end, all of my points should be down here in the 4th quadrant. If I end up with them somewhere else, then something went wrong. Okay. Then we have to go, okay, from my rules of rotations up here, 270 counterclockwise is this one. We go from xy to y -x. Okay. So from xy to y negative x. So I'm going to take my coordinates here. A was 1, 5. B was 3, 3. And C was 2, 1. And that's what I'm going to do to them. I'm going to get A prime, B prime, and C prime by switching x and y and changing the sign on x. I know, drawing coordinate planes is not my favorite either. They actually make stamps that you can like stamp a coordinate plane on your paper. It's kind of cool. But yeah. I'll wait a moment, let everyone finish drawing here. I think Amazon has them. Yeah, I've definitely considered buying one this year because usually I just like when we're in person, I just print up packets and like have the coordinate planes and everything already printed in there for everybody. So we don't have to spend time drawing coordinate planes. But this year, since we're not in person, I can't go and hand you a packet. So this is what happens. Anyway. Okay. So here we go with our coordinate plane and our points. We're going to switch x and y first. So it's going to become 5 and 1. And then I'm going to take this coordinate and change the sign. So it'll be -1 instead. Doing the same thing with b, but since it's 3, 3, it stays at 3, 3, but this one changes the sign. And then for C, it was 2, 1, so we'll switch it and it becomes 1, 2, but then I change the sign on this one to make it a -2. And then I want to plot those new points. So A will be over 5 down 1 for A prime. B prime is over 3 down 3. And C prime is over 1 down 2. And then we connect the dots. All right. And so the shape itself should look the same. It should still be a triangle and everything like that and look roughly the same, just rotated around 270 counterclockwise or 90 clockwise because those are the same thing. Okay, so the trick here is making sure that you get your coordinates right. So when you're doing your IXL for this, it would be a good idea to have a piece of scratch paper nearby so you can write down coordinates and then write down the new coordinate version. Just doing these ones in your head can be a little bit difficult and it's really easy to make mistakes. So we want to make sure that we have paper nearby. Okay, any questions on this first one? Any questions at all on the first one here? Okay. So we'll do another. And we are going to draw another coordinate plane, if you guessed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, we do our best to make these roughly equally spaced, but as you can tell, mine are not perfect. Okay. So my original shape is going to be, we'll go over 2, down 2 for one of my points. That'll be A. Over 3, down 5 for B. C will be over -1, down 2. So -1, -2. And then D will be over 0, down 5. So 0, -5. And this one we are going to be rotating A, B, C, D. We'll go 90 degrees counterclockwise. 90 degrees counterclockwise. Okay. I'll wait a sec, let everyone finish drawing here. We have A is at 2, -2, B is at 3, -5, C, oops, I should have labeled this one D and this one C. So we're going to switch that really quick just so that it, because we wouldn't call that shape A, B, C, D then if we didn't. So sorry about that. We are switching C to be the 0, -5 and D to be the -1, -2. Okay. So we are going to rotate 90 counterclockwise. So looking at our rules, that means we are going from XY to -YX. So we're going to switch them and change the sign on the Y this time. So if we write down our coordinates, we had A, B, C, and D. A was 2, -2, B was 3, -5, C was 0, -5, and D was -1, -2. So those were the ones that we're starting with. And then we are going to change them. To A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. And we are switching X and Y, and then we are changing the sign on the Y. So A prime, if we just switch them straight up, it would become -2, 2. But then I need to change the sign on this one. Since it's negative, I'm going to make it positive. On B, we're going to switch them. We got -5, 3 if we just switch them. But I need to change the sign on this one, so it becomes +5. With C, we do the same thing, switch them to -5, 0, but then we change the sign on this one to make it +5. And then on D, we do the same thing, -2, -1, but we change the sign here to make it +2. Then we have to graph our new coordinates. So A is going to be 2, 2. So over 2, up 2. B will be 5, 3. So over 5, up 3. And then C will be over 5, up 0. So here is C. And then D is 2, -1. So over 2, down 1. And then we connect the dots. Okay. And notice how most of this shape is here in the fourth quadrant. And if I'm going 90 degrees counterclockwise, that would be one turn to the left. So that would be one turn, one quadrant to the left. And most of it is in this first quadrant here, which is where we would expect it to be given that we were rotating 90 counterclockwise. So that is what it should look like. We've confirmed we've done it right. We have our coordinates, we have our shape, we're good to go. Any questions on this one? Any numbers we're not sure where they came from or points we're not sure about? Okay, one more. Then we'll get to our assignment. Okay. So this one is going to be a composition of transformations. So this will give us some practice with rotation, and it'll also give us some practice doing more than one thing. Let's see. Is it given when they tell you what to switch, like X and Y with X? When they tell you that it's 90 degrees counterclockwise, that's where we go back to our notes and figure out what it's supposed to be. So like, yeah, since they'll tell you these will be the instructions. Rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, and they'll give you a shape. And then what you have to do is go back to your notes and go, okay, 90 degrees counterclockwise. Well, that's the one that matched up with this, where you switch X and Y and you change the sign on the Y. So yeah, all you'll be told, yeah, is what to rotate. Then you go back to your notes and figure out what that means for that shape or for that rotation. Okay. So a composition, we kind of touched on composition a little bit in 4.1 when we would do a translation and then we would do another translation. That is a composition because you're doing more than one thing to the shape. So composition now is going to involve doing like a rotation and then a translation or something like that. So that's what we're going to try here. So go ahead and draw yourself a nice coordinate plane. And let's see, we'll do a triangle. We'll start at -1, -2. Coordinate -1, -2 for that one. And then we'll do -2, -4. And -4, -1. So that's going to be our original shape. And we're going to be given two instructions here. First instruction, rotate ABC 180 degrees. Second instruction, translate. We'll do with these instructions. X plus 2, Y minus 4. Okay. And it's very important, always do the first instruction first. I know it might seem like, duh, you do the first thing first, but it's important here. You might see the rotation and go, oh, I don't really like rotation, so I'm going to do the translation first. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure we rotate first and then translate. We want to follow the instructions in order. So, rotating 180 degrees, we bring out our notes and we go, okay, that tells me that I need to just change the sign on X and Y. Great. So that means we're going to go from X, Y to negative X, negative Y. So I'm going to write down my coordinates. We had A was at -1, -2. B was at -2, -4. C was at -4, -1. And we are going to rotate. So A prime, B prime, C prime. And all I'm doing is switching the sign on X and Y. So instead of -1, -2, it's going to be +1, +2. Instead of -2, -4, it's going to be +2, +4. Instead of -4, -1, it's going to be +4, +1. And then I'm going to go ahead and graph those things. So we're going to go over 1 up 2 for A prime, over 2 up 4 for B prime, and over 4 up 1 for C prime. Okay, so now we've rotated it. Now that we've rotated it, we need to translate this shape with these instructions, X plus 2, Y minus 4. So then there's two ways you could do this. You can take your A prime, B prime, C prime coordinates over here, and we knew that that was 1, 2, 2, 4, and 4, 1. And I could change the coordinates with adding 2 to the X values and subtracting 4 from the Y values. That's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is think about, what is this translation telling me to do? Well, it's telling me write 2 and down 4. So if I know it's telling me write 2 and down 4, I could also just count. Write 2 down 4 for each of my coordinates. Write 2 down 4. Either way you want to do it is totally fine. What your third set of coordinates is going to be called is A double prime, B double prime, C double prime. So instead of 1 apostrophe, you're going to have 2, or a quote. And so if I was going to do it with just figuring out what the new coordinates would be, I'm going, okay, X coordinate is 1, 1 plus 2 is 3. Y coordinate is 2, 2 minus 4 is -2. For B, my X coordinate was 2, 2 plus 2 is 4. And then 4 minus 4 is 0. Then 4 plus 2 is 6. 1 minus 4 is -3. So those would be my new coordinates, my third set. Or you could count. Either way. You can go write 2 down 4 if you want to. So for A double prime, we are going to end up with over 3 down 2. For B double prime, we're going to end up with over 4 up 0. And for C double prime, we end up with over 6 down 3. And if we were doing this on paper, we would want to color in our last version of the shape to show that that's our final iteration of it. So that's a composition. You might end up saying like rotate it and then translate it, or translate it and then reflect it, things like that. But yeah, so that's the basics of a composition. We won't do a ton with composition, but it's a good thing to be aware of and know how to do. So it's just kind of combining more than one transformation here. Okay, any questions about rotation or composition or anything like that? And notice we've done one example of each type of rotation. In the meantime, I have a question for you guys. Why don't I rotate 360 degrees? Any ideas why I wouldn't want to rotate 360? Yeah, it would be in the same place. 360 is a full rotation. It wouldn't do anything to it. Yeah. So a 360-degree rotation would be pointless. Okay. Let's go ahead and I'm going to post the homework, and then if you would like more examples after I post it, you can stick around. If you would like to work on it on your own, you can head on out and work on your own. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. We got L8 and L9 today to a SMART score of 80. We have two types of rotations. One is with graphing and the other one is with just finding the coordinates. So when we're going to graph the image, what I would do is write down my coordinates. So for example, this one is, or I guess you don't have to write down your coordinates. You can kind of take it piecewise. This coordinate is, let's see, 0, -9. If I'm rotating it 180 degrees, that means I'm just changing the sign on both of my coordinates. So instead of 0, -9, it'll be 0, +9. For this one, it's -9, -9. So instead of -9, -9, it'll be +9, +9. And then this one is -9, -3. So instead of -9, -3, it'll be +9, +3. So if you can do it like that, kind of thinking it out in your head, or even talking it out loud, go for it. If you want to write down your coordinates, that also might be a good way to go. Write them down and then change them as you go. Make sure you keep your notes with you so that you remember your rules of rotation. If you end up memorizing the rules of rotation, great. If not, you always have that on your notes. The second section is just finding the coordinates for a rotation. So this one's 180 degrees. It tells you the original coordinates, and you want to put in the new coordinates. So again, 180 degrees, you just change the signs on your coordinates. So instead of 3, 1, this one will be -3, -1, -7, -1. 0 is not positive or negative, so it stays. The 9 changes into a -9. Okay. At this point, you are free to head on out if you would not like more examples. If you would like more examples, or if you have particular questions, stick around. I will post an exit ticket later. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.